It's a small consultancy firm that focuses on helping businesses setting up their online structure, especially software and games as a services. And I gathered LiveOps experience on the publishing side and the development side. I worked for Perfect World, which is a Chinese publisher, and for Crytek, which is a German developer. But let's get started. As James already mentioned, LiveOps, the term in PC and console, is not the same as monetization. If you would go to a PC person and say, hey, how does LiveOps do your events? Or how does LiveOps do your marketing? They would just look at you weirdly and think you're from another world or something. So whereas LiveOps and mobile is very widespread, as we saw in the previous presentations, on PC it's normally reduced to NOC or monitoring your system and maybe BI. So in order to bridge the gap, what we do is we divide LiveOps for PC and console into game service development, the people that take care of your content, improvements, and your updates, and game service operation. And then we have core groups, your core plus groups, and your peripherals. The core groups are the people you definitely should have in publishing, producer, monetization, that are just directly related to your product. Your core plus groups are people that are assisting you. They're nice to have and a should have at one point, but you don't necessarily need them. And then the last group are the ones that help you setting up, you touch point with them, like your development or relationship managers, cross-promotion, which is also not as strong on PC and console as it is on mobile. What's interesting, you will see it also in the second slide, a lot of the functions and roles are actually the same in mobile, but the expertise behind it is very different. So if I talk about the monetization manager for PC or console, he has very different expertise and might focus more on your ecosystem improvements instead of rewarding ads. Okay. Second group is game service operations, and those are the people that run your service, maintain your service, and provide you with the right data you need in order to get your content and improvement features in, and so on. We have the same groups again, the core plus, and peripherals. I think the game service operation is the one where it varies the most depending on what game type you have and on which platform you eventually go, because you do not only have one platform on PC, you will have multiple, and I get to that in a second. But here you also can see the roles and functionalities are the same, but the expertise behind it will be different. So once we have that out of the way and we understand that LiveOps does not mean LiveOps for PC and console, we can focus on the platforms. So I want to make sure when I talk about the next steps in this presentation, when I talk about systems, I talk about PC, Xbox One, PS4. When I talk about platforms, I talk about things like Apple, Google, the PlayStation Network, and so on. You will see why that's important. But let's go through what kind of platforms we have. On mobile, it's very easy. We have Apple and Google. Well, I'm not going to talk about Facebook. It's upcoming, you have it, but that's not where my expertise is. On console, we have PlayStation with their PlayStation Network. We have Xbox One with their store, and upcoming this year is actually Nintendo Switch with their online subscription, which will bring a whole new layer to it, and will be pretty interesting to have a handheld in the console space. Then where it gets complicated is the platform providers on PC. I divide them in 3 different areas. We have the marketplaces, just as Steam and Tencent Wii games, which are most popular. Those marketplaces, you can distribute your games on it, and you have their billing support, but you still take care of most of the operation. Then there are the third-party publishers, which license your games. If you want to launch them, they take care of distribution, billing, and all the surrounding operations. And then you have the people that self-publish, like Riot Games, Blizzard, and so on. When you decide to go into self-publishing, you normally decide to do so because you try to build up a portfolio strategy. And you do that with very strong IPs and brands. So if you're a smaller indie game developer, you most likely will go on Steam on a marketplace solution. So We have the platforms itself, but that does not make the whole picture. For the whole picture, you have to understand that your service includes also all the additional features you have to build up in order to support that platform. You have your communication tools, your BI tools, your operational tools, oh, one too far, and your monitoring systems, which are not provided by the platform, but you need to serve your users. To show the complexity this creates on the PC game, well, PC system, I want to use Warface. Warface is a first-person shooter, free-to-play, created by Crytek Kiev in 2000. I think they started development 8, and it was launched first in Russia by Mil.ru. It was really successful during the first year in Russia. It had over 9 million daily users, daily active users. And Crytek decided, hey, let's take this success and try to do the same on the Western European in the Western markets and the Asian markets. So they decided to self-publish first with Try-On Worlds and then later on by themselves in US, in Europe, and in Turkey. And then they added on top of it Brazil with LiveOps, another platform provider, in addition to Tencent, another platform provider with their Wii Games platform. Back then it was still Tencent Games. Plus a couple of other South Asian markets. And well, as if that is not enough, they added Xbox One console onto it. So in the end, an unexperienced free-to-play publisher who actually was a core AAA developer decided to launch on 2 systems and 8 different territories with 7 different platforms, which was a challenging time. And what we learned during that time is that modularity is key. So we had to balance the publisher needs versus the player needs versus our own resources, because we didn't only had to create and set up live operations for where we published back then in the US, in Europe, and in Turkey, but we also had to provide the support for the other LiveOps teams of the other publishers. And Warface, you have to understand, was a game that was never intended to be multi-published, so it was just one giant bunch focused completely on the Russian market. We had to change monetization, we had to change progression, we had to update features and assets and localize it for, I think in the end, there were like 13 different languages and, as I mentioned, 8 territories. So we took it all apart. We looked at all the different pieces. What do have all platform providers in common? What don't they have in common? And then we started building it up again, and in a way that any platform provider can easily plug in their system, use whatever they need, turn on off the features they need, put in their own balancing system, their monetization system. We dubbed it lovingly plug and play in the end, which was super fun, but that worked out. And by this, we could resources we normally put into build development, because every SKU needed their different setup, and taking out this, taking out that from different branches, we could then invest those resources in developing actual content for the users. So if you're planning to go on console or on PC, make sure you build this modular. You have on and off switches for your features. I often get asked, so which platform is best for me? Or in which territory should I start launching the game? And there are a lot of varieties also on a high level that we can't cover here, but the most important thing I always tell people is look at how much ownership you like to give up of your game. And we go into detail by looking at the user funnel. So the user funnel is your manual to user journey, user experience. You know how the users get in, you know how they consume your content, you go through the core loop, you go through monetization, and you know exactly what they do when. You can start again on a very high level and then break it down super granular so you understand it best. We saw a couple of funnels throughout the day, from registration to campaign funnels to UGA core loop. Because once you've done this, you have the ability to assign responsibilities to it. We talked about the functions earlier, so but which functions do we actually need for what? And then by having this granular level of the user funnel, LiveOps exactly knows, okay, if something's wrong with monetization or there's something wrong in the shop and we didn't put that price there, they know exactly, okay, this team is responsible, let's give it to them. In addition, we can mix and match features to it. If we want to have a sign-up funnel or registration funnel that is on a landing page where the marketing guys can easily switch out assets without development help, then we have a CMS feature. And if we think that's more important than working on features in the other two funnel parts, then we can prioritize as LiveOps and see where we focus on. But the most important part and the next part is once you have the granularity of your funnel, you're able to make it measurable and to track it. The first thing I tell developers is when they start their game is make sure that for every important step in your game you have an event created. So you can define data points with a beginning event and an end event, because that allows you to track it, to measure your goals properly, and to find a common understanding with everyone. Hey, this is what we mean by when we say user, or this is what we mean when we say player. I recently worked with a company and I went in there and asked, okay, what is a player for you? Or how many players do you have? And they said, oh, we have right now 20 million players. I was like, that's pretty impressive. Then I went to the next person, asked, so how many players do you have? And they say, well, we have 9 million players. And I'm like, how does that happen? There's a discrepancy of 11 million users in there. And the reason for that is that the first person thought a player is a person that just registered, and the second person thought a player is someone who actually logged into the game and played it for a while. Because they had the self-publishing set up, and their users started being their users once they signed up on the platform. So it's super important to know where does your event start, where does it end, how do we define them, and it also makes LiveOps job much easier to see if there are any issues. I talked about ownership earlier. I want to take it through the funnel and go into detail about the different areas where it impacts how you set up your game and how you set up LiveOps. So let's start with acquisition. Your entry points for mobile, PC, and console are very different, but they're also kind of the same. So everyone starts with the platform registration. You have to notice here that platform registration, whoever owns the platform also owns the user. So if you go with someone for PlayStation or Xbox, the user is not yours. You don't know who he is. It's very similar to mobile. Then the user gets to the product page, which is again owned by the product platform provider. And important to know is you don't have control about those, the store page of the platform. You don't have control about it. There's limited space. Everyone is competing about it. And it's very similar, again, to mobile, where the space is limited and there's so many competitors. I think in this case, it's more impactful on console, because on PC you have different entry points. You're still in the same system when you're in the browser. You have different methods to get your people into Steam and actually see where they're going through. Then once they browse the product page, the store page, they go to your product page where you have control over and can set, okay, this is how we do it, this is what we want to provide to the user, this is the information we get, and then hopefully convert them into installing your game and then finally using it. So as I mentioned, right now you have a user in your system, you don't know who they are. There are possible tracking points like footprinting or creating shadow accounts to follow them, but in order to really make them your user, you have to add an additional funnel in your registration, and that would be the publisher registration. I always am cautious when talking to people about it, because on PC we noticed with several campaigns over the years that with every additional step in your user registration funnel, you lose 10 to 15% players. A good example is closed beta keys. So everyone thinks, oh yeah, my game, we sent out closed beta keys, people want to try it, let's send out 1,000 and we have enough CCU for the first beta weekend. But of those thousands, maximum of 100 will actually go and play your game. So make sure when you decide on which platform you go, how much of the ownership do I want to keep, how much risk am I willing to take to add this additional step of registration, and also what is the accessibility for the user. For PC users, it's very easy. They're used to signing up additionally in the launcher, but for console users, they just have the controller. They don't have the keyboard or input, so it's a really awkward experience. Then the next level is when we go into the content area with your game core loop. So for LiveOps, it's important to know what's your code to life. How long does it take from an idea to the actual user-facing product, and when can we put it user-facing? Traditionally, you produce this, while a developer works on it, it then gets into a warehouse where it's made ready for distribution into the different territories, or packaged differently depending on where you release it, and then it goes into your shop. But as soon as you go on a platform, and that's for mobile just the same as for console and PC, you add another gate of restriction. This doesn't have as much an impact on PC as it does have on console, because the console providers, platform providers, they want you to go through verification processes, certification processes. So for every additional patch you put out there, they have to approve it. You're not in control of what you release or not. Then the next part is in your monetization funnel. I think everyone knows if you go on any platform, you have to pay like 30% rev share, which is okay. They take care for you about distribution and billing, and I can tell you, in the beginning of my LiveOps experience, we had to implement our own billing system into our games, and you can be very thankful that platform providers do exist, because you have to fight with Visa, and you have to be sure to be compliant to a multitude of things I don't even want to remember. So in my opinion, that's a fair share to give away, a fair slice of pizza to give away. But in addition to that, you also need to consider that those platform providers control the exchange rates. So some of your users might see different prices than others, and you have no control over it. You can communicate around it and make sure people are aware of it, but it's out of your hands. In addition, on Xbox One, for example, you cannot sell items in your store that you sell for real currency. So if you create a founder's pack, or you create certain bundles where you want to attract users with, you cannot have them in your store anymore. Or you need to make them different, but they don't like to see that. And well, again, how much are you willing to give up over your ecosystem and your content? Another thing which I think is important to remember is that you have kind of limitations as well to promote those items. In mobile, you have those in-app purchases, and in iOS 11, I think you have them even promoted now. But if you want to do something new, like a DLC, or you want to have a special bundle for a special event, it's not visible anywhere. You have to find different channels to get them promoted and for users to see them. Okay. The next point is two more little helpers I want to go through. The first one is, we called it the Game Publishing Tech Compass. We created it last year. It's a listing of all the different tools Live Operations has to work with or gets in touch with. And the same with roles and functions. You will see that the tools you need are the same, just the technology behind it is very, very different. So what we recommend to do is set up your data structure first. Make sure that data structure is right. Once it's right, you can always remove things without losing essential information. Then you move on to your product layer, where you add the client. So for example, on iOS, or if you go on mobile, you have a much smaller client, and you care about things like crash rates and loading time and session time. On PC, when we create a client, we care about frame rates, we care about long-term retention. So I think I forgot to mention that earlier. If you look at retention, in mobile you have the D1, D2, and so on, so very short-term focus. But on PC and console, everything is long-term focus related. So if you invest into something or you put a new content out there, then you only see the revenue increasing most of the time 30 days after actual release, or 15 days after actual release, depending on what your cycle is. So consider that when you set up your business reports and data mining and your cohorts. The next layer then we have operations. It's generally, you can say that it costs much, much more to set up infrastructure for your PC and console than for a mobile online game. So the scaling up can go very quickly, it can become very expensive as well, but scaling down is not as easy. So when you build your operations tools around the system, again, keep in mind, we start with a small solution. Let's go with the CRM solution. We start with MailChimp because we don't have that many users yet. Let's use it, plug it in, send out the messages, and hopefully then over a few years we'll have enough users that we can afford a bigger CRM, just as Salesforce. And because your data structure is right, your setups are right, your cohorts are right, you can then easily switch them out. But then from Salesforce, because the data you store in there, going back to MailChimp, you would lose a lot of information. So just be aware of those small things. So start from the inside of the circle when you set up your tools for LiveOps, and then go outside to the communication and the user-facing part. The last thing is a small list, step by step, I like to go through. You can use it for new features, gap analysis, whatsoever. We did the user funnel already. Next step would be setting your goals and then matching all the things we discussed against your goals and targets. That's actually it. One advice I want to give everyone is that no LiveOps is perfect from the start. Test, rinse, repeat. We had that earlier already, but that's the most in things. Iterate as much as possible, discuss things internally as much as possible, and see LiveOps more as a central hub for publishing and developing and as a service than just LiveOps. Any questions?
When you moved so you guys moved from mobile to PC console, am I?
I always was in PC console.
Okay, so you're just comparing the two. Okay, so compared to mobile, when you're looking at short-term user acquisition, quick turnaround, mm-hmm. What's the biggest sort of difference as far as that part of LiveOps in, say, a PC console? Is it that time difference? Is it that people expect to play the DLC longer, or it's just a completely different animal altogether?
It's the amount of content that you provide, right? So you have two different kinds of PC. You have the RPGs, the long-term investment, and you have those session-based games. And normally on PC, because it costs much more to create new content, you have different cadences in which you release the content. So you have 2 weeks cadences, I think League of Legends does it right now, or you have monthly cadences like Black Desert Online, or you just have your seasonal events because you're already such an established game such as World of Warcraft. And then because of these points, you actually base your retention dates. And for mobile, why is it different? It's much faster, the session you have and the people that play it. They're not as long-term invested as when they really go into this big PC game where they want to play for hours and hours. I think the expectations of user mobiles and PC and console mobiles are different, and that's why you have the retention difference.
So on that note, did you find it was better? So for mobile, it's the idea of selling in-game content is really, really big, and that's a good vector for profit. Do you find it's better to clump that sort of stuff into DLC and sell it that way instead of having sort of in-app purchases, or is both a good thing? Does it depend?
You mean on mobile or on PC and console?
On PC.
Okay.
On PC and console.
Yes. It really depends on what you want to achieve with that update, right? I'm not opposed to in-app purchases, well, in-store purchases in the game. I'm not opposed to loot boxes. I'm not even opposed to DLCs, as long as it's properly communicated to the user. Again, expectation management is key here. If I tell a user, okay, you can play this game up to level 5, but then you have to play, I think that's okay because user goes in there with the right expectation. Left 4 Dead is doing that right now. One of the Valve games is doing that right now. And for in-game purchases, there are also a lot of different methods. You have items that help you in the game, that boost you. You have items that reduce your time you need to spend to get to a certain level or to a certain goal. And you have items that are purely for convenience. And if you communicate your game around, okay, if you play this, expect to pay for either of these items, then it's fine. I mean, that's your monetization model, and players are normally not opposed to it. But if you put, I mean, we all saw StarCraft, put DLC loot boxes in there for incredible amounts, and then I need to be careful of my wording, and then not tell people, hey, this is how it's going to be, and then suddenly release it, of course, all the people will be angry because that was badly communicated. But if you set the expectations right, the people know, okay, this is the game I play, then it's okay. That's why you also have so many differences in all the territory, right? For Russian people, it's absolutely normal to buy from the beginning the most high-end tank in World of Tanks, for example. And every player knows it. Well, I'm probably going to lose because someone else who can spend money got that tank. But they never sell items you cannot grind. That's important to know. In China and Korea or in the Asian markets, it's important for them to have this social achievement. Hey, I achieved something. I'm really good. I'm platinum in League, or I'm #1 on the leaderboard in PUBG. And then you build your monetization system around that. In the Western market, that wouldn't work. So in the Western market, you normally go for pretty skins and nice layouts and stuff like that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, for the most part, it does. Yeah, thank you.
No. Thank you.